Hi guys, in this lesson I'm gonna go over how you can invert the chords you already know to get some new and interesting voicings. Most of the time when we're working on chord voicings, we're working in systems like drop 2 and drop 3, and we're also checking out the inversions right away. But in some cases, most people also play voicings that are not placed in systems like this. And if you start analyzing them and looking at what notes are in there and start making inversions of them, you can get some new voicings that you can use, and also some interesting exercises in knowing the neck better and finding fingerings for note groups. The way I'd suggest you invert the voicings and make new chord voicings out of something is based on a string set in this lesson. So just to demonstrate that, if we take this C major 7 with a 9, which is sort of like a shell voicing with an added 9 on top, and then if you look at the notes, then of course we have a C, an E, a B and a D. If I order them in one octave, then so that means in this case just taking the D down an octave, then we get C, D, E and B. And you can look at that, since they're now ordered in a scale after pitch, you can always just take each note of this chord and then move it to the next note in that row. So that means that if I want to make an inversion of this, then I'm going to take the C, move it up to a D, the E is going to go up to a B, and B is C and D is going up to E. So that's the idea, and that's how we're going to move it. So we're kind of going to consider this order like the C, D, E and B as a sort of scale. It can be useful also to check it out on one string, like, and then do that for the strings that you need, because that's how you're going to make the voicings. So let's just invert that voicing. So in this first example with the C major 7 voicing, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about how I move from one chord to the next, and just talk about where every note goes. I think I'm going to probably loosen up a bit on that in later examples. But if we start with the main chord, we have the C major 7 with a 9 here. So C goes up to D, E to B, B moves up to C, and D to E. Then we have this voicing. And if I repeat that from this voicing, so we have D moves up to E, B to C, C to D, and E up to B. Then we get this one. And if I do that one more time, then I'm gonna end up with this voicing. Let's see. And as you can tell, some of these voicings are gonna be really difficult to play, because as soon as you have intervals that are close to each other, I mean the melody that's going on here, basically we have B, C, D and E right next to each other, and then we start making that into chords and making inversions on them. And that means that you're going to have 3 notes close to each other most of the time, and that's always difficult to find a good voicing for on guitar, because that means that you have to spread out a lot. In this one you can actually still play it, so this is still, if not comfortable, it's still playable. It's not the kind of voicing you want to sort of riff on for entire blues chorus or something like this, but at the same time it is possible and you can use it. It has a certain sound, so it will work well for that. And in some of the other examples you'll see some really difficult voicings to play, that we have to sort of go through all sorts of tricks to just being able to play them, if at all. And it doesn't really matter. If you find voicings that you can't play, then you just don't use them. It's just as much about just finding stuff that works really well. Like this one is a really nice voicing. So in that way we turn this one into another fairly easy to use voicing. Of course it has some large spreads, but I think it's still fairly playable. So the second voicing we can try this on is this voicing. You can use this, it's like a D triad over a G bass note, and you can use that as an E minor, or as a G major 7 or A sus type of voicing. So the row that you get, if we order this, since I'm sort of thinking of it from a G point of view here, then the notes that we get in there are like G, A, B, D and F sharp. So that's what I'm gonna move up. And if I start to invert that on this string set, the top string set, I get this for the first one. And then the last two inversions of this are going to be really, really difficult to play. The first one is this one. Let's see if I can do this. With the D there, which is obviously not really possible to play. The next one is this one, where we have this note. But you can actually play that if you use like this old Lenny Bro trick, where you play that note, the F sharp, which is here, as a harmonic here. That way you can play it. Again, this is a real cluster. So it's not the kind of thing. Again, it's not the kind of thing you really would want to comp with. It's for special effects probably, but it is possible to use it like that. This next example is a little bit more down to earth because it's just going to be this stagger fourths. So from B, and again, you can use this as a G voicing or as an E sus voicing or C major or D6/9 voicing. And the interesting thing about this is that once we start inverting it, we actually kind of recognize it as something else, because we have this stagger fourths, and then if I move it up, it's going to be this one, which is already starting to look a little bit drop 2 related, and the next one is really clearly an E7 sus 4 voicing in drop 2, and then we get this one. So that way, by just inverting this, you start realizing how it's connected to a drop 2 voicing, which is in itself also a bit interesting. So of course these voicings are not always stuff that you're just gonna throw in every standard that you play, and you probably have to sort of sit and figure out where you can use them, and they're more for places where you really want to have a specific sound, and you probably will be playing like a long chord and not just a bunch of 16 notes with the chord. But it's worthwhile to checking out, because you do get some other sounds than you're used to, and it can give you some new ideas if you need that for a ballad or something like this, or for some more open sounding piece. I think also it's a really good way to sort of start exploring stuff that's more close to what you would hear in an Alan Holdsworth kind of composition, where the chord voicings are also really spread out, and maybe not always that clear, but then also sort of very distinct sounding and with a lot of character, which I think is quite nice for voicings, if you have sustained voicings anyway. So for that, this is useful to finding those kind of voicings. And of course, as I mentioned, knowing your chords and really knowing what notes are in there, and putting them in a context like that is really, really useful, because it's also going to open up stuff. If you realize that this one is actually related to your E sus voicing, maybe it's going to open up some doors, because you can relate it to other E sus stuff. And also just knowing the neck and really looking at what happens if I start moving this voicing up. It's gonna make you know the voicings and know the chords a lot better, and also maybe knowing what you want to play on them, because you're gonna realize what kind of sounds you actually like in terms of what note groups you want to use for chords. Just to demonstrate how this works, I made 3 examples of just basic 2-5-1 cadences using some of these and some other more open sounding voicings. So let's go over those. So here, for this first example, it's just 2-5-1 in C, and I'm using this voicing from the example with the C major 7 voicing. So yeah, this is just it's kind of related to a drop 2, drop 4, F major 7 voicing that I'm using for the D minor. Then you get a sort of fairly standard drop 2 voicing for the G7, and this voice leads really, really nicely into this C major 7 voicing from the second example. The second example sounds like this. So here I'm starting off with fairly straight ahead drop 2 voicing. Then you get this, which I just call a D7 altered. You could also look at this as coming out of the whole tone scale, so it's like a D7 with a flat 5 and a sharp 5, and there's no 9 involved, so you can't really tell if it's an altered 9. And then the voicing I'm using on G major 7 from example 3 is this one. I think in the example I talked about it like this, but I tend to use it a little bit more up here, which is why it's The final example sounds like this. So again, we have a 2-5-1 in the key of C. I'm starting out with this D minor. So this is a D minor 7 with a 9, because you have a sort of the basic shell with a F and a C here, and then a root and a 9 on top. And then I'm moving over to this sort of incomplete type of a G7 altered. So you have the third, flat 9, flat 5, and flat 13. And that resolves really nicely into our sort of E-sus voicing that I'm using for the C here. The kind of voicings you get out of something like this are usually the kind of voicings where you want to play them as sustained voicings, because what's interesting about them is actually sort of the construction and the sound of them with this combination of close intervals and really wide intervals. I think that's sort of what you can use it for. And it's also, as you can tell in the examples, it's a lot of incomplete chords, because we're sort of more concerned with specific sounds, like this one out of the second line, that the voicing, that exactly this set of notes create, more than trying to really convey a clear sound of a dominant or a tonic chord or something like this. So that's a little bit how you want to use them. And it's not maybe something you want to, as I mentioned earlier, it's not something you want to throw in Donna Lee or something like this, unless you want to play Donna Lee really open, of course. I hope you can use the ideas here to make some new voicings for yourself and start exploring what you can actually turn the voicings you already know into. I think it's a really useful thing to check out, even if it's just for exploring the different chords and what notes are in there, and having some exercises to work on knowing the neck better. And also practicing to find fingerings, because as you can tell, some of these things are really difficult to play, and trying to sort of come around that. There are easier ways to play some of them than what I'm going over here, because I'm sort of trying to stay a little bit more with the string set, and sometimes you can just choose not to have a note on a string and make something easy to play, but you can figure that out yourself. That's half the exercise of what I'm trying to cover here. If you want to download a PDF of the examples that I went over here, then you can go to my website. There's a PDF download in the article that's accompanying this lesson. On my website you can also subscribe to my newsletter if you want to stay up to date with what's going on in terms of new lessons in my web store, or if I'm playing somewhere or recording something. If you have any comments or suggestions for topics, stuff I should do lessons on, or things I should do differently or go into more deeply, then leave a comment on the video, or connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google+, and it's nice to get feedback from you guys, so please let me know if you have ideas or if you have suggestions for things I should do differently. If this is the first time you see one of my videos, I make a new video and publish it every Thursday, and I've been doing this for quite some time, so I've made almost 100 different video lessons, and they're on my channel, so you can subscribe if you want to stay up to date with that. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.